Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And Canadians are in a vast amount of debt. I think we have been reporting on this, John, for like 6 years or something like that, crazy like that. I don't know. But most Canadians will notice that. I mean, when most Canadians go to the store and buy things, their purchasing power is down. Everything costs more. There's taxes left and right. There's regulations and legislation left and right. It's just getting ridiculously hard to afford things in Canada. And I think most of us have recently seen in the gas prices as well. But we'll go into all that in a moment. But first, I'm going to look at this Yahoo Finance article that says, trapped in an endless cycle of debt. Half of us are $200 away from insolvency. And as the article goes into, nearly half, 48% of Canadians surveyed say they are just $200 away from financial insolvency, according to the MNP Consumer Debt Index. 1 in 4, 26% among the group, say they have no wiggle room at the end of the month because they don't earn enough to make ends meet. Confidence in the ability to repay debt is at the lowest level since tracking began in 2017. And I quote, "When there is this little room in the household budget, people can easily get trapped in an endless cycle of debt," said Grant Bazian, president of MNP, in the report. And I quote, "This isn't simply a matter of people living beyond their means. The reality is that too many households simply cannot make ends meet, however hard they try." A string of interest rate hikes by the Bank of Canada in 2018 stirred up anxiety among the indebted, but a central bank seemingly on hold has somewhat eased fears. Still, 54% say they are worried about repaying debt, and 47% say a rate hike will spell financial trouble. Canadians appear to be maxed out with no real plan for paying back what they have borrowed, said Bazian. This raises many alarming questions about how and if consumer debt will be repaid, particularly if conditions deteriorate or interest rates rise. And yet 67% say they piled on more consumer debt, and 44% say they are borrowing just to cover living expenses. Credit has become inextricably woven into Canadian household budgets, said Bazian. A whole industry has grown up around making that happen, from payday lenders to credit card companies to buy now, pay later retail offers. Now, I want to also mention something that I find is somewhat comical in the sea of madness, is that while Canadians are in vast amounts of debt because of the governments and the central banks and vast inflation, which we'll get into in a moment, at the same time, I mean, we're extorted to pay off the interest on the debt, which shows that the Canadian government itself has no plans to pay off the debt. They are just paying the interest on it. Does that sound like someone that wants to pay off the debt? No, because they're up to their ears too, and they don't know what they're doing, or maybe they do and they're just genius at enslaving everyone. Maybe that's the case, but nonetheless, my point is we are facing vast inflation. The price of living is skyrocketing, and what do people say? We want more centralization. We want more government. We want more restrictions, because apparently, according to most people, thanks to school indoctrination and media indoctrination, like the state-run CBC, people actually think the same things that create the problem in the first place are going to solve the problem, not realizing the real problem is vast printing of currency, vast amount of centralization of the economy, propping up markets, complete restriction of markets, propping up major monopolies at the hand of the state via regulations, taxes, etc., while pushing out small businesses, destroying the middle class, and thinking that people will ask for more of it to help save them from that same problem. The Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, repeat. John, what do you think?
Well, let's take a quick look at the interest rate that you were talking about there. There's several interest rate hikes. Of course, you're looking at it went from 0.5% up to 1.75. That's 1.25. That's like nothing. Listen, if we are struggling just because of that tiny little increase, we got some serious problem here in the Canadian economy. Of course we do. We all know that because we've been covering it for a very long time. And of course I wrote in my book, Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, ? That this was going to happen, because you can't just keep on accumulating debt forever and think that things are going to be fine, as the Keynesians believe that we have. So that's what we're in right now. We're in a massive debt problem, and we've been pushing this for a very long time. It's just happens over time that you accumulate just too much debt, and then there's no way out other than declaring, as they said, 48% of people had only about $200 left away from insolvency, and that's what you are heading towards when you have that much debt. And if you
Well, John, how close are we to like negative interest rates in this situation where basically it's a tax? I mean, it's so crazy.
Well, let's take a look at what happened during the last crash in 2008. Canada was about 4.25% in interest rate at that time, and then they went down to about 0.25, I believe, at the lowest. So that is a 4% drop. Well, if you're going to drop 4% now, we'd be negative 2.75% in our interest rate, and of course. That is just another way of taxing people, which we just recently got hit with a massive carbon tax all across, well, not all across Canada, because some people volunteered to take it, and it was Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and I believe it was New Brunswick, and Alberta. I forgot exactly which provinces it was, but they didn't volunteer, so they got imposed by the federal government, the new carbon tax that got pushed upon everybody.
Have you seen the British Columbia gas prices? It's crazy. They're hitting like $1.90.
Well, yeah, they're heading towards Norwegian gas prices, and of course Norwegian gas prices they are getting close to about. We're looking at $3.6. So they still got a long way to go to compete with Norwegians that have.
Yeah, but John, wasn't Norway the first place to have a carbon tax?
Yeah, this is the whole lie behind this, Josh, and it's just ridiculous, because I actually ran the numbers, because they said about 15%. The carbon tax since 1992 has risen. The carbon pollution has risen 15%. Well, actually, they didn't take account the population growth in Norway, of course, because they said it was per capita. Well, the problem is it was almost about 1 million more Norwegians, and that ended up being 42%. So any taxes on anything, and I don't understand, having not learned, Josh, that we can't tax things and then think that people are going to stop doing it. It doesn't happen. People go to the black market. They'll go away from the government, which is great, actually. I love that idea. But this is what happens. It's
the free market always wins.
Yeah, exactly. The free market always wants to fight back, and now you're looking at this crazy cannabis legislation that came in, and I was listening to the radio how they discuss this, and it's pretty hilarious, because they don't understand that the government, they kind of starting to get it, that the government actually have increased the price almost threefold, most places, even fourfold sometimes, on the cannabis from the actual free market, what they call black market.
I have to say, John, when you bring up like cannabis and everything, and it reminds me like how many times I see them talking about on the mainstream media about the issue, and they're like, well, it's to protect people, blah, blah, blah. It's like the government was the same one that prohibited cannabis in the first place, created a war on drugs, armed cartels, created all these problems, go to war with all these countries, create all this debt, create vast poverty, which creates slums, which creates crime, and on and on and on, and they're creating all this problem, and we need to protect them from. It's like it's problem, reaction, solution, repeat for eternity, and it's so infuriating at the same time to see so many people lay down. The state has killed more people than any other entity. They've indebted more people. They've stolen from more people. They've kidnapped more people and put them in cages for victimless crimes. They've put them to death. I mean, the amount of things that like the government does versus what they allegedly do that's so-called good is so far and between, it's ridiculous. But when we see this complex of centralization and debt, what we see really is a government and central banking system attempting to push people into servitude. Because if you shove someone down a bottomless pit of debt, they are forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, pushing them into perfect servitude to them, right where they want you. So why wouldn't they? I mean, the government only does what benefits them. They cannot give you freedom. They can only take it away. And Justin Trudeau, yeah, he's a complete moron. I called him a scumbag to his face.
I think scumbag is better, Josh.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it though. The guy's an idiot and he's a terrible person and all that kind of stuff and caught up in all these controversies. But what is another puppet going to do to change that? The entity is a problem. In with the new boss, same as the old boss, like that isn't going to do anything. It's just a repeat of the same system that we've seen going back to ancient Greece. And when has it ever worked? Everyone just always says, well, maybe the next guy will be better. Change we can believe in. Well, it's basically just an incremental frog boil that gets worse every single time, and it normalizes that the terrible nature of the state to the point where we forget what it used to be like to have a little bit more freedom, and we think, well, maybe this other guy will fix it. And it's just a perpetual paradigm that goes on forever.
Yeah, Josh, I think with the upcoming elections here in Canada coming up, I believe is it next year, Josh? I'm trying to remember now. Is it 2020 or is it this year? I kind of forgot. But with the upcoming elections, though, Josh, we are looking at, people trying to vote for the lesser evil or whatever that is. And what I suggest is you pick up a copy of my book and pass it along to every idiot politician that comes along your line and try to educate them a little bit about what actually is going wrong in Canada. It's massive government sucking up all the capital, stealing all the money from the population, together with all these mass amounts of printing of money to try to save the economy from the inevitable, this Keynesian idiocracy of trying to keep a monetary system afloat by just constantly printing more money and making people poorer and poorer. Meanwhile, the government is implementing more and more taxes. It's like completely insane. And then people start begging to the government for more money. Wake up, people. We got to wake up here. This is getting insane over here in Canada. And of course, I see where we're going. We're going the route of Norway, where people are living that get their pensions from the government that they haven't even saved up money because they couldn't afford it because of high taxation. They are now living in poverty with that money from the government. And that's what everybody's going to head towards if you don't wake up here and understand really how to protect our money and to protect, the number one thing we need to protect our money from is actually the government, and then second come banksters, of course, because both of them are working in coalescence, especially with the Canadian RSP, Registered Retirement Savings Plans. It's one of the biggest scams ever. And if you read
I don't think people even see what's coming at them with the pension scheme. The pension bubble is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's massive, and the thing is, it will happen when we have the devaluation of the currencies. And recently here in Canada, they said that inflation is ramping up in Canada. Of course, ever since they implemented the carbon tax, gas prices here in Manitoba has gone up about almost 30 cents. About 30 cents. So they really increased here. People are starting to wake up to it. And people are, now I'm looking at the stores. I'm going into the stores buying groceries. I see things have gone up even there. So people are waking up to the inflation that is now trickling into their life finally.
That's because, John, the carbon tax is just a tax on everything, right? So like imports, exports, everything goes up in price because things have to be shipped to places. People don't seem to comprehend this.
No, 100%. This is just a tax on everything. And it just trickles into the economy because everybody has to now charge more for everything. And on top of that, people have had stagnant wages for a while. And now you're seeing both in Norway and other countries that they're jumping in wages. And that, of course, people are now seeing that their cost of living are going up. My mom got a raise after 4 years of stagnant wage, and then she was super excited. But then to wake up to that, the gas bill was going up, the rent was going up, and she had very little left of that actual raise that she thought was so great. This is what we're waking up to here, and of course this is happening in Canada as well. And Canada has, now we're looking at Canada being number 8 in the world for private debt, and private debt to GDP, and they're 266.61% currently as of December 2017. We of course haven't gotten the 2018 numbers because the government is pretty slow at anything they do. And if you look at the top 10, Josh, it's all of the highest tax countries in the world that are top 10 in indebtedness. So is there a correlation there? I don't know. Could be. But yeah,
you could say the same thing about the United States and look at California and New York and New Jersey and places like that. It's pretty obvious. And it's all about the purchasing power, right? Because in the end, people think that they're getting a raise raises. They think that they're making more money, but they raise the price of everything else to level up, if not even worse. And then your purchasing power buys less. And it's like, oh, I got a raise, but for some reason that loaf of bread costs more than my raise.
Yeah.
So yeah, what happened there?
Yeah, and then of course now, Josh, that you're seeing people are starting to sell off real estate because we have a real estate crisis in Vancouver and Toronto. That money is slowly trickling into the economy as well and creating that extra inflation on top of everything else. So we're gonna be in for a very deadly surprise here in Canada. And if people don't wake up and learn about why these reasons are, they're gonna start voting for idiots again to believe that they can make a change in the economy, which is not going to happen. And they just need to wake up to that. Pick up a book. And of course, there's lots of books out there, but my book was specially made for the Canadian economy, and I think it's very educative for the everyday person to actually pick it up and read it. It's not like an academics book that Paul Krugman or what's his name, Kenneth Rogoff, idiots like that are writing that nobody can understand unless they studied years of economic and stupid academic language that they try to hide the real reasons of why they're doing things. So it's like, yeah, you can't understand this because this is the economists that have to fix the economy. Meanwhile, they were the one completely destroying and eviscerating it, Josh.
Yeah, it's hard to free fools from the chains they revere, and unfortunately that's a case because we become so indoctrinated in Canada and elsewhere around the world where people believe they're getting free things, but they don't understand where those free things come from, and they don't understand the money being printed out of thin air and the vast amount of debt that that's creating. And it all adds up, and it all makes people less free, and it all costs people more. That's why we see such a rise in poverty and debt. Like people don't seem to correlate the two, and it's crazy. And obviously, like we were mentioning the carbon tax, and that was why I confronted Justin Trudeau years ago, or a year or so ago. It was because I guess that was 2 years ago, man. It was because I had to ask him, like, how do you justify people having to choose between heating their homes and feeding their families in the winter because of your carbon tax? And he called me rude, and I got choked out by security, and then I called him a scumbag. But of course the news only shows the part where I call him a scumbag and say I was shouting at him in front of children when there were no children around. This is what we're up against. The media is a monolithic beast of disinformation, and so is a state, and so is a banking system, and they fool you into servitude. They fool you to fall on your knees and beg for more when that begging actually creates a problem that leads you to fall to your knees in the first place. We need to break free from that, and there's more solutions than there are problems. I mean, when it comes down to it, I always say food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Disobey, be responsible, be self-sustainable. Do not obey the state. Obeying the state makes them a reality. They're just a shadow on the wall in reality, but people are cheerleaders for them, and they actually believe they give them power by believing in that power. But in the end, they're inefficient. They can't do the simplest task other than killing and stealing from people, and they're not even that good at that. But with that said, also like gold and silver, we have a link with Mike Maloney below that everyone should check out, goldsilver.com. Mike Maloney's a great monetary historian. Definitely check that out. And then check out our subscribe star below, which helps us a lot. Just by the way, we're getting really shadow banned lately here on YouTube to the point where it's almost impossible to reach anyone. It's getting worse by the month. We are dropping in viewership 50% every month since December, while subscriptions are skyrocketing. Tell me how that makes any sense. And then anyway, for you guys, I think it's also important that you all check out things that are properly decentralized, like cryptocurrencies that are free of the state, mostly the privacy-oriented ones, because we are building a revolution in the cryptocurrency blockchain world, especially that which has fundamentally useful technology, and then blockchain infrastructure to replace the state, not just a cryptocurrency aspect. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to you can do to keep this information flowing, as well as we work hard here at WHAM to bring you that information. So lots of options. Obviously, check out John's book, Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, ? It's up on Amazon and elsewhere. Just make sure to check that out. John, final words as we close this off?
Well, the final words, you said it almost at the last there, Josh. You were talking about cryptocurrencies. And, of course, the reason why they're great is because they're off the banking grid. They're off the control grid of the governments. And that's why we need, in my opinion, this is, of course, our opinion, that's why we need to get off of that control grid and give ourselves our own freedom back from these controlled cartels out there. And banks in Canada are very under cashed. They have very little cash. We've done reports on this before, Josh, but I just wanted to mention this at the end because Canadian banks and credit unions are some of the worst in the world for cash to deposit ratios, which means how much they have in cash available for you to take out versus your deposits that you have in your bank accounts. And of course, in capital controls this happened in 2013 during the bail-in in Cyprus. People started using Bitcoin. So there's definitely that link there that people saw that was hugely beneficial for the Cypriots when the crisis hit themselves. So we need to, hedge ourselves here and watch the warning signs that are flashing, and then know how to protect ourselves from confiscation that's going to happen when these banks are going down.
Yeah, because they're desperate. They'll do anything. And the banks are bankrupt. Look at their balance sheet. The cash to deposit ratio is ridiculous. But with that said, I mean, again, this isn't investment advice. This is our opinion. But look at history. That tells you enough. Anyway, we will continue to update you on all of this and continue to break down these issues. I'm heading to Africa soon. So if I disappear for a week or so, that is why. If I disappear for more than a week or so, then call the police. Anyway, so thanks for going into this with us, John, and we'll be back at you with much more here at WHAM. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here at WHAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.